The stars looked different when you traveled faster than light. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon and watched the streaks of white blur past the viewing screen. His crew had been exploring this sector for 3 months now. They were the first humans to venture this far from Earth. Every day brought something new. Every scan revealed planets that no human eye had ever seen. It was the dream that had driven humanity to reach for the stars. Jake never got tired of it. The console beeped. Lieutenant Dan Crawford looked up from his station with wide eyes. He was young, and this was his first deep space mission. His hands moved across the controls as he verified what the sensors were telling him. Jake walked over and placed a hand on the back of Dan's chair. The captain could see it too. 12 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace directly ahead of them. They were massive vessels. Each one was at least twice the size of the Horizon. Their hulls gleamed with a strange metallic sheen that seemed to shift colors in the starlight. Jake hit the comm button. His voice stayed calm and steady. The crew needed to hear confidence right now. He ordered all hands to battle stations but kept weapons offline. This was first contact. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. They had prepared protocols and trained diplomats. But nothing really prepared you for the moment when you realized you were not alone in the universe. Jake took a deep breath and ordered his communications officer to open a channel. The response came quickly. A face appeared on the main screen. It was not human. The being had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its face. Its skin was a deep purple color and covered in ridge patterns that might have been decorative or functional. Jake could not tell. The creature spoke, and the ship's computer translated the words into English. The voice was smooth and carried an edge of superiority that Jake recognized immediately. He had heard that tone before from people who thought they were better than everyone else. The alien introduced itself as Ambassador Velrith of the Korthan Empire. It said that the Horizon had entered territory controlled by the Galactic Council. The Council was an organization of 12 species that governed this region of space. Velrith explained all this in a tone that suggested he was talking to a child. He said that humanity was unknown to the Council. He said this with what might have been a smile. Jake was not sure. The gesture did not translate well across species. Velrith invited Jake to bring his ship to a nearby station for formal discussions. He called it Kepler Station 7. The location was only 2 hours away at standard speed. Velrith made it clear that this was not really an invitation. It was an order. Jake looked at his crew. He saw concern on their faces. Dan's hand was hovering near the weapons console. The young lieutenant was ready to fight if necessary. But Jake shook his head. They had to try diplomacy first. He accepted the invitation. Kepler Station 7 was enormous. It hung in space like a small moon made of metal and glass. Hundreds of ships were docked at various ports. Jake could see at least 20 different designs. 20 different species, perhaps. The Horizon looked tiny as it approached one of the docking bays. The station traffic control guided them in with efficient precision. These people had been doing this for a very long time. Commander Lisa Harper joined Jake for the meeting. She was Earth's chief diplomat on this mission. Lisa was smart and tough. She had negotiated treaties on 4 continents back home. She did not scare easily, but even she looked nervous as they walked through the station corridors. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal. The air smelled strange. It had a sweet quality that made Jake's nose itch. Aliens of various species moved past them. Some stared. Others ignored the humans completely. Jake and Lisa were escorted by 2 Korthan guards to a large conference room. The room was circular with a high-domed ceiling. Holographic displays floated in the air showing star charts and data that Jake could not read. 12 beings sat around a curved table. Each one looked different from the others. Jake realized he was looking at representatives from each of the council species. Velrith sat in the center. He gestured for Jake and Lisa to sit in 2 chairs that had been placed opposite the council. The chairs were too small. Jake felt like he was sitting in furniture made for children. He wondered if that was intentional. Velrith did most of the talking. He explained that the Galactic Council had maintained peace and order in this region for over 10,000 years. He said this with obvious pride. The Council had laws and regulations. They had trade agreements and military protocols. They had a system that worked. Now humanity had appeared. Velrith made it sound like humans were an inconvenience, an unexpected problem that needed to be managed. Lisa listened carefully. She asked questions about the council's structure. She inquired about member species and how decisions were made. Velrith answered, but Jake noticed that his responses were vague. The council appeared to function more like a dictatorship than a democracy. The original 12 species held all the power. Other species could apply for limited membership, but they had no real voice. Jake did not like the sound of that at all. Then Velrith presented the treaty. A holographic document appeared in front of Lisa. She read through it carefully. Her expression grew darker with each paragraph. The treaty would give the Council control over Earth's military forces. It would restrict human expansion to their current 3-star systems. It would require Earth to pay tribute in resources and technology. It would make humanity a servant state. Lisa looked at Jake. He could see the anger in her eyes. She kept her voice level when she spoke. She told Velrith that these terms were unacceptable. Velrith's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. He seemed genuinely surprised by Lisa's refusal. He explained that every species that encountered the Council accepted these terms. It was standard procedure. The alternative was conflict. The Council had substantial military forces. They had never lost a war. Smaller species always chose to submit rather than fight. It was the logical choice. The reasonable choice. Lisa stood up. Jake rose beside her. She looked at each council member in turn. Then she spoke clearly so there would be no misunderstanding. She said that humanity appreciated the Council's offer, but Earth would remain independent. She said that humans governed themselves and answered to no one else. Then she delivered the warning. She told them plainly and simply not to mess with Earth. She said humanity was asking nicely now. She said they would not ask a second time. The room fell silent. Then several of the council members began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. Velrith's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. He told Lisa that humanity controlled 3 small systems. The council controlled thousands. He said humans had been spacefaring for less than 50 years. The council had been exploring the galaxy for millennia. He found human arrogance entertaining. He said Earth had 30 days to reconsider. If humanity did not accept the treaty by then, the council would take corrective measures. That was his exact phrase. Corrective measures. Jake and Lisa returned to the horizon. The moment they were back aboard, Jake ordered an immediate departure. He set course for Earth at maximum speed. They needed to warn their people. War was coming whether humanity wanted it or not. The Galactic Council had made a critical mistake. They had dismissed humans as primitive and weak. They had laughed at the warning. They would learn soon enough that humanity did not make idle threats. The long journey home gave Jake plenty of time to think. He knew what was coming. He had studied enough history to recognize the pattern. A powerful empire encounters a smaller independent nation. The empire demands submission. The smaller nation refuses. War follows. It had happened 1,000 times on Earth. Now it was happening among the stars. The horizon reached Earth 4 days later. Jake immediately reported to Fleet Admiral Chris Bennett at Strategic Command. Bennett was a veteran of 3 colonial wars. He was old and scarred and nobody's fool. He listened to Jake's report without interrupting. When the captain finished, Bennett sat back in his chair. He looked tired. He had hoped for more time before humanity faced this kind of threat. But hope did not win wars. Preparation did. Bennett activated the emergency protocols. He called an immediate meeting with the Joint Command. Representatives from every branch of Earth's military gathered in the war room deep beneath Geneva. Jake and Lisa presented everything they had learned about the Council. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for accepting the treaty. They said humanity was not ready to face a galactic empire. Others argued for immediate military buildup. They wanted to fortify every colony and build more ships. Bennett listened to all sides. Then he made his decision. Earth would prepare for war but would not strike first. They would strengthen their defenses and wait. If the Council attacked, humanity would be ready. Bennett ordered all military personnel to active duty. He recalled every ship to defensive positions. He activated the secret research projects that had been running at the Henderson Research Facility for the past decade. Jake received new orders. The Horizon was to join the defensive fleet at Mars. Lisa was assigned to Diplomatic Corps headquarters. The Council fleet looked like a wall of metal hanging in space beyond Jupiter. 200 warships arranged in a formation that spoke of centuries of military tradition. Lieutenant Dan Crawford counted them twice to make sure the sensors were accurate. They were accurate. Jake Morrison stood at the center of the Horizons Bridge and felt his heart rate slow down. This was it. The moment every soldier both fears and prepares for. The moment when training becomes reality and decisions carry the weight of lives. War Commander Thex commanded the Council fleet from his flagship Dominion. He was a Vexian warrior with scales like armor plating and eyes that could see into the infrared spectrum. Thex had fought in 17 campaigns across the galaxy. He had never lost a battle. The Council sent him because they wanted this to be quick and decisive. They wanted humanity to see overwhelming force and surrender immediately. Thex studied the human defensive positions with professional interest. The humans had arranged their ships in clusters around Mars and Earth. It was a decent formation for primitives. It would not save them. Thex opened a communication channel that broadcast to every human ship and every settlement in the solar system. His voice was deep and carried the weight of absolute certainty. He announced that humanity had failed to accept the Council's generous terms. Therefore, the Council would now enforce compliance. He demanded immediate and unconditional surrender. All human military forces were to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. All planetary defenses were to be dismantled within the next 6 hours. Failure to comply would result in the systematic destruction of human military assets, followed by orbital bombardment of military installations on Earth. Jake listened to the ultimatum and felt anger rise in his chest. Thex spoke like he was explaining something to a misbehaving child. The war commander seemed genuinely convinced that humans would simply give up. Jake switched to the command frequency. Admiral Bennett's face appeared on his screen. The old warrior looked calm. He had fought in situations like this before. Bennett asked Jake if his crew was ready. Jake looked around his bridge. He saw Dan Crawford gripping his console with white knuckles. He saw his weapons officer checking targeting solutions for the 3rd time. He saw his navigator plotting evasive courses. These were good people. They were ready. Bennett broadcasted a message to the entire human fleet. His voice was steady and clear. He reminded them why they were here. He reminded them that Earth bowed to no one. He told them that their ancestors had fought for freedom on their home planet for thousands of years. Now they would fight for it among the stars. Then Bennett gave the order to President Karen Mitchell in the command bunker. The response to Thex would come from the highest level of human government. President Mitchell appeared on every screen in the solar system. She looked directly into the camera with eyes that held no fear. She spoke 3 words. You were warned. Then she gave Fleet Admiral Bennett full authorization to engage the enemy. The communication ended. Thex received the message aboard his flagship. For a moment he seemed confused. Then he laughed. The humans were actually going to fight. This would be educational for them. A harsh lesson about the consequences of defying the Council. He ordered his fleet to advance. The Council ships moved forward in perfect formation. Their shields glowed with protective energy. Their weapons charged with power that could crack a moon. Thex had assigned different squadrons to different targets. He would destroy the Mars defensive grid first. Then he would move on to Earth's orbital stations. The planet itself would be left intact but humbled, broken enough to accept Council rule. This was standard procedure. The Council had done this to dozens of species before. Captain Amy Foster commanded the defense frigate Valiant. She was stationed with a squadron of 12 ships near Mars. They were the first line of defense. Amy watched the Council fleet approach and felt ice water run through her veins. This was terror, pure and simple, but Amy had learned long ago that courage was not the absence of fear. It was doing your job despite the fear. She opened a channel to her squadron. Her voice was calm as she gave the order to break formation and engage. The human ships scattered like startled birds. The Council fleet expected them to hold position and try to defend a fixed point. Instead, the human vessels accelerated at angles that pushed their engines to the limit. They came at the Council formation from 12 different vectors. Thex frowned at the unexpected tactic. It was reckless. The human ships were breaking apart their own defensive line. They would be destroyed piecemeal. He ordered his forward squadrons to engage. The first energy beams lanced through space. Council weapons were powerful and accurate. They had been perfected over thousands of years of warfare. 3 human ships took direct hits. Their shields flared and buckled, but they did not explode. The human ships kept coming. Amy watched her shield indicators drop to 60% from a single hit. The Council weapons were strong, but human shields were stronger than anyone expected. The Council had based their intelligence on human commercial vessels. They had never seen military-grade human technology in action. Amy brought the Valiant into weapons range. She gave the order to fire. The frigate's main cannon charged and released a bolt of concentrated plasma. The shot crossed the distance in less than a second and struck a Council destroyer amidships. The Council ship's shields absorbed most of the impact but overloaded from the stress. The destroyer's hull took damage. Atmosphere vented from a dozen ruptures. Thex watched this happen and felt the first tremor of doubt. That was a frigate. A small ship. It had just damaged a destroyer with a single shot. The battle turned into chaos. Human ships moved like fighters instead of capital vessels. They used their smaller size and greater maneuverability to avoid the worst of the Council fire. They struck from unexpected angles and broke off before the enemy could target them effectively. Commander Greg Hamilton led a squadron in a flanking attack that caught a Council cruiser with its shields oriented the wrong way. Human torpedoes tore through the exposed hull and detonated inside. The cruiser broke apart in a flash of white fire. Dan Crawford watched the tactical display from the Horizon's bridge. The battle looked like madness. Ships crossed paths at speeds that should have resulted in collisions. Energy beams and missiles filled the space around Jupiter like a deadly light show. But underneath the chaos, Dan could see the pattern. The human ships were fighting as individuals, but with coordinated purpose. They were adapting to the enemy in real time. The Council ships moved in rigid formations. They followed predetermined battle plans. They were not adapting. Thex realized his mistake too late. He had brought a fleet designed to intimidate and overwhelm a static defense. Instead, he faced an enemy that fought like predators, fast and vicious and unpredictable. His formation was designed for mutual support, but that meant his ships were clustered together. Human weapons took advantage of this. A missile meant for one ship would damage 2 or 3 others nearby when it detonated. Thex tried to order his fleet to spread out, but the humans pressed their attack and prevented the maneuver. Captain Amy Foster saw her opening. A Council battleship had moved ahead of its support vessels. It was isolated for just a moment. Amy called in every available ship in her squadron. 8 human vessels converged on the battleship from different angles. They fired everything they had. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds and quantum torpedoes hammered the battleship's shields. The energy field collapsed under sustained fire. Hull armor melted. The battleship tried to turn away, but human ships were everywhere. A torpedo struck the ship's main reactor. The explosion was tremendous. The battleship became a miniature sun for 3 seconds before it went dark. Thex watched 40% of his fleet take damage in the first 30 minutes of battle. This was impossible. These were primitives. They should have been swept aside in the first 10 minutes. Instead, his forces were being carved apart by ships that moved like nothing he had ever seen. His sensor officers reported strange readings. Human weapons were using technology that the Council thought belonged only to them. Plasma confinement. Quantum targeting. 0-point energy shields. How did humans have this technology? Jake Morrison brought the Horizon into the fight. The exploration vessel was not designed for combat, but it had been fitted with military weapons during the 30-day warning period. Jake targeted a Council destroyer that was trying to flank Admiral Bennett's command ship. The Horizon's weapons were not powerful, but they were enough. The destroyer's shields were already weakened from previous hits. Jake's attack finished the job. The destroyer lost power and began drifting out of formation. The battle lasted for 3 hours. It happened in the space around Jupiter and its moons. Ships dodged around the gas giant's massive bulk. They used the planet's gravity to slingshot into attack runs. They hid in the debris fields of destroyed vessels. The humans lost 19 ships. Every single loss hurt. Those were people Jake knew, friends and colleagues, but the Council lost 63 ships, over 30% of their fleet. Thex could not believe what was happening. This was supposed to be a simple enforcement action. Instead, it had become a nightmare. Captain Jake Morrison took the Horizon deep into uncharted space 3 weeks after the battle. Admiral Bennett had ordered reconnaissance missions to gather intelligence on the Council. Earth needed to know what they were facing. The Horizon traveled through sectors that no human had ever seen. Jake's crew mapped systems and scanned for Council activity. They were far from home when they found something that changed everything. The debris field appeared on sensors near a dead star. Dan Crawford reported the contact with confusion in his voice. The field was massive. It stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Jake ordered a closer approach. What they found took his breath away. Ships floated in the darkness. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. They were wrecks, ancient and cold. But the technology visible in their broken hulls was beyond anything Jake had ever seen. These were not council ships. They were something else entirely. Dr. Helen Price was the Horizon's science officer. She had degrees in xenoarchaeology and ancient civilizations. Helen suited up and took a shuttle to examine the nearest wreck. Jake watched from the bridge as her shuttle disappeared into the hull of a vessel that dwarfed anything humans had built. Helen's voice came over the comm with barely contained excitement. She was seeing technology that should not exist. Power systems that had no visible fuel source. Hull materials that had survived whatever battle destroyed these ships. Symbols carved into every surface in a language she had never encountered before. Helen spent 6 hours examining the wreck. She took thousands of images and samples. When she returned to the Horizon, her eyes were bright with discovery. She showed Jake what she had found. The symbols were mathematical. They were equations and formulas. Helen's computer had been working to translate them during her entire survey. The results were staggering. These ships had been built by a civilization that understood physics at a level far beyond the Council. They had mastered energy manipulation and space-time mechanics that were still theoretical to human scientists. Jake asked the obvious question. Who built these ships and what happened to them? Helen did not have complete answers, but she had theories. The evidence suggested a species called the Architects. They had existed millions of years ago. They had built an empire that spanned galaxies. Then they had vanished. Every trace of their civilization was gone except for ruins like this battlefield. Helen believed the Architects had fought a war. Against what, she could not say. But they had lost. The discovery raised more questions. If the Architects were so advanced, why had no one ever heard of them? Why were there no records in any database? Helen examined the debris more carefully over the next few days. She found something that made her blood run cold. Some of the wreckage showed signs of salvage, recent salvage. Within the last few thousand years, someone had been here. Someone had taken technology from these ruins. Helen showed Jake the evidence. The cut marks were precise. The removed sections were specific components. Power cores, weapons systems, drive mechanisms. Someone had strip-mined this battlefield for technology. Jake felt pieces clicking together in his mind. He contacted Admiral Bennett on Earth through the quantum comm. The transmission took several minutes to reach home. Jake explained what they had found. He shared Helen's theory about the Architects and the evidence of salvage. Bennett listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, the Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked Jake to send all the data immediately. Bennett said he would share it with the Intelligence Division. Something about this discovery felt important, critical even. Back on Earth, Commander Lisa Harper was working on a different problem. She had been trying to establish communication with species inside Council space. If humanity was going to survive a prolonged war, they needed allies. Lisa sent messages through every channel she could find. Most went unanswered. The Council controlled communications across their territory. But one message got through. A response came from an unexpected source. An alien named Quell. Quell was a Narvoni. His species had been part of the Council for 2,000 years. But they were not happy members. Quell's message was brief and cautious. He said there were others like him, species who resented Council dominance. He said the Narvoni had watched humanity's battle near Jupiter with great interest. He asked if Earth would be interested in information. Lisa immediately reported this to Admiral Bennett. The Admiral authorized her to make contact. This could be the break they needed. Lisa met with Quell in secret. The Narvoni had arranged a rendezvous at a neutral trading station outside Council territory. The location was risky but necessary. Lisa took a small stealth ship and traveled for 3 days to reach it. Quell was waiting in a private room. He was a tall being with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. His eyes were kind. Lisa had learned to read alien expressions during her diplomatic training. Quell was genuinely trying to help. Quell explained the truth about the Galactic Council. They were not the advanced civilization they claimed to be. They had not developed their technology through innovation. They had stolen it. Thousands of years ago, the founding species of the Council had discovered ruins, ancient sites filled with technology beyond their understanding. They had spent centuries reverse engineering what they found. They had built their empire on the backs of a dead civilization. The architects, Lisa felt her suspicions confirmed. Helen's discovery and Quell's information matched perfectly. The Council was a fraud. They had taken credit for achievements that were not theirs. Quell continued his explanation. The Council feared any species that showed signs of real innovation. Any culture that developed its own advanced technology was a threat. It risked exposing the truth. So the Council suppressed them. They either forced submission through treaties or destroyed them completely. Dozens of species had vanished over the millennia, wiped out for the crime of being too clever. Quell told Lisa about the Narvoni's own history. His people had been explorers and scientists. They had created beautiful art and profound mathematics. The Council had given them a choice 2,000 years ago. Submit or die. The Narvoni had submitted. They had given up their independence. They had stopped innovating. They had become servants to maintain their survival. Quell's voice carried the weight of 2,000 years of resentment. His people had watched other species face the same choice. They had watched some choose death over slavery. The Narvoni had been too afraid to resist. Until now, humanity had done what the Narvoni could not. Humans had said no. They had fought back. They had won their first battle against overwhelming odds. Quell said this had sent shockwaves through Council space. Species that had submitted long ago were asking questions. If humans could resist, why couldn't they? The Council leadership was panicking. They were preparing a massive response to crush Earth before the rebellion spread. But Quell and others like him wanted to help. They wanted humanity to survive. They wanted the Council to fall. Lisa asked what kind of help Quell could offer. The Narvoni provided detailed intelligence about Council military positions. He gave her access codes to communication networks. He shared information about Council supply lines and manufacturing centers. Most importantly, he told her about 3 other species who were ready to join a rebellion. The Kelthans, the Vryn, and the Sotheri. All of them had been suppressed by the Council. All of them wanted freedom. They were waiting for the right moment. Waiting for a leader to rally behind. Lisa returned to Earth with the intelligence. Admiral Bennett reviewed it with his staff. The information was invaluable. It showed Council weaknesses that human forces could exploit. But it also revealed the scale of what they faced. The Council had resources across thousands of systems. They had millions of ships. They had been preparing for total war. Bennett made a decision that changed the course of the conflict. Humanity would not wait for the Council's next attack. They would strike first. Bennett called it Operation Freefall. The plan was bold to the point of madness. Human forces would launch simultaneous attacks on 3 Council military installations. The strikes would cripple Council logistics and buy time for the rebellion to organize. Bennett knew the risks. Earth's fleet was still smaller than the Council's. But humans had advantages. They had better tactics. They had the element of surprise. Most importantly, they had nothing to lose. The Council would not stop until humanity was destroyed or enslaved. Better to die fighting than live in chains. Jake Morrison received his orders while still in deep space. The horizon was to join the attack on a Council shipyard in the Telos system. The shipyard built most of the Council's heavy warships. Destroying it would severely damage their ability to replace losses. Jake gathered his crew and explained the mission. He did not sugarcoat the dangers. This would be the most difficult operation any of them had faced. Some might not come back. He gave everyone a chance to transfer to different duty. Not a single person took it. They were committed. Helen Price asked Jake if she could join the assault team. She wanted access to the Council's archives. If they were going to attack the shipyard anyway, they might as well steal data. Helen believed the archives would contain information about the architects. The Telos system appeared on the horizon's view screen like a jewel in the darkness. 3 planets orbited a yellow star. The second planet was covered in industrial platforms and orbital stations. This was the Council's primary shipyard. Jake Morrison counted at least 50 vessels under construction in various stages of completion. Massive frameworks of metal and energy scaffolding surrounded hulls that would become warships. This place was the beating heart of the Council's military production. In a few hours, it would be a graveyard. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect coordination. 3 dozen ships materialized at the edge of the system. Jake immediately ordered weapons hot and shields to maximum. The element of surprise would not last long. Council sensors would detect them within minutes. Every second counted now. Admiral Bennett's voice came through on the command channel. He was leading the second attack group against a supply depot in the Kronos sector. Commander Lisa Harper coordinated the third strike on a communications hub in the Vega system. All 3 attacks had to succeed. Failure was not an option. Lieutenant Dan Crawford reported enemy contacts. 12 Council patrol ships were moving to intercept. They had been stationed near the shipyard as security. Jake felt his pulse quicken but kept his voice steady. He ordered the fleet to break into 3 groups. The first would engage the patrol ships. The second would assault the orbital stations. The third would provide cover and deal with reinforcements. Jake took the horizon with the assault group. Dr. Helen Price was already suited up in the cargo bay with her security team. She would board one of the stations as soon as the defenses fell. The patrol ships opened fire first. Energy beams lanced across space. The human fleet scattered and returned fire with devastating accuracy. Jake watched as Captain Amy Foster's frigate Valiant danced through the enemy formation. Amy had survived the Jupiter battle and learned from every moment. Her ship moved like it was alive, dodging and weaving and striking from unexpected angles. 2 Council patrol ships exploded within the first 5 minutes. The others tried to fall back, but human ships pressed the attack without mercy. Jake brought the horizon into weapons range of the nearest orbital station. The structure was enormous. It bristled with defensive weapons and shield generators. This was not going to be easy. Jake called up the intelligence data that Quell had provided. The Narvoni had given them detailed schematics of Council installations. Every station had a weak point. The shield generators drew power from a central reactor. If they could overload that reactor, the shields would collapse. Jake ordered his weapons officer to target the power junction on the station's lower hull. The Horizon's plasma cannon charged and fired. The bolt struck true. The power junction exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. The station's shields flickered and died. Jake immediately signaled the boarding teams. 6 assault shuttles launched from nearby human ships. They crossed the distance in seconds and latched onto the station's hull. Breaching charges detonated. Marines poured into the station through the smoking holes. Colonel Ryan Hayes led the assault. He was a veteran of countless boarding actions. His voice came through the comm giving orders and coordinating his teams. The Council security forces inside the station fought hard. They had been caught off guard, but they were professionals. Ryan's Marines pushed through corridor after corridor. Firefights erupted at every junction. The close quarters combat was brutal and fast. Ryan lost 3 soldiers in the first 10 minutes. He pushed the grief aside and kept moving. They had a mission to complete. The Marines reached the station's command center and breached the door with explosives. The Council officers inside tried to activate the self-destruct. Ryan's second-in-command put them down with precise shots. The command center was secure. Helen Price came through with her security team right behind the Marines. She went straight to the main computer terminal. Her fingers flew across the alien interface. The Narvoni had provided access codes, but the system still fought her. Council security protocols were sophisticated. Helen had prepared for this. She inserted a data spike into the terminal. The spike contained virus programs designed specifically to crack Council encryption. The programs went to work. Within minutes, Helen had access to the archives. What she found made her hands shake. The archives contained everything. Records going back thousands of years. Lists of species the Council had destroyed. Locations of architect ruins across the galaxy. Technical specifications for every piece of stolen technology the Council possessed. Most damning of all were the internal communications. Council leadership discussing how to suppress emerging civilizations, plans for genocide, orders for orbital bombardment, evidence of crimes that stretched across millennia. Helen downloaded everything. This data would change the galaxy. Jake watched the battle unfold from the Horizon's bridge. The human fleet was taking damage but holding together. 5 ships had been destroyed. Twice that many were badly damaged. But the Council forces were being systematically eliminated. The patrol ships were gone. Half the orbital stations were either captured or destroyed. The shipyard itself was in chaos. Workers were evacuating in panic. Construction vessels tried to flee, but human fighters hunted them down. Jake felt no joy in the destruction. This was necessary but ugly work. War always was. Captain Nicole Turner led the fleet group in the Kronos sector. Her mission was to destroy the Council's main supply depot. The depot held fuel and ammunition for dozens of Council fleets. Nicole's force was smaller than Jake's, only 12 ships, but she had surprise on her side. The depot was lightly defended. The Council had never imagined anyone would attack it. Nicole's ships emerged from hyperspace right on top of the facility. They opened fire immediately. Torpedoes and missiles streaked toward the depot's fuel storage tanks. The explosions were spectacular. The first fuel tank detonated and set off a chain reaction. One tank after another went up in massive fireballs. The depot's defensive shields overloaded trying to contain the blasts. Nicole pulled her ships back to a safe distance and watched the facility tear itself apart. The Council fleet in this sector would be stranded without fuel. They would not be able to pursue human forces or reinforce other positions. Nicole reported mission success to Admiral Bennett. 1 target down. 2 to go. Commander Lisa Harper watched the attack on the communications hub from the command ship Phoenix. This target was the most critical. The hub coordinated all Council military communications across 3 sectors. If they could take it intact, they would have access to enemy fleet movements and strategic plans. Lisa had insisted on a more surgical approach here. Instead of destroying the hub, they would capture it. The operation required precision that bordered on impossible. Lisa had the right team for the job. Lieutenant Sophie Barnes commanded a special operations unit trained for exactly this kind of mission. Her team included hackers and combat specialists. They infiltrated the hub using a captured Council transport. The ship's identification codes were provided by Quell. The codes got them past the outer defenses. Sophie's team docked with the hub disguised as a routine supply delivery. They walked right through the main entrance. The Council guards never suspected anything until Sophie's team drew weapons and took control. The hub's personnel were shocked into submission. They had never experienced an attack before. The hub was supposed to be secure, deep inside Council space, protected by layers of security. Yet here were humans holding them at gunpoint. Sophie's hackers went to work on the communication arrays. Within an hour, they had rerouted all traffic through a hidden relay. The Council would not even know the hub was compromised. Every message they sent would be intercepted and read by human intelligence. Lisa smiled when she received Sophie's report. This was better than she had hoped. Jake received word that all 3 attacks had succeeded. The cost had been high. Earth lost 11 ships and over 300 personnel. But they had struck a devastating blow against the Council. The shipyard at Telos would take years to rebuild. The supply depot at Kronos was completely destroyed. The communications hub was compromised. Admiral Bennett addressed the fleet over the command channel. His voice carried satisfaction and sorrow mixed together. They had proven that humanity could take the fight to the enemy. But they had also lost friends and comrades. Bennett ordered the fleet to withdraw to predetermined coordinates. They needed to regroup and repair. The Council leadership received reports of the attacks within hours. High Counselor Draven watched the footage from Telos with growing rage. Humans had penetrated deep into Council space. They had destroyed military installations that were supposed to be untouchable. Worse, they had done it with minimal losses. The Council's technological advantage was not as overwhelming as everyone believed. Draven called an emergency session. All 12 Council members gathered in the High Chamber on Dravis Prime. Ambassador Velrith attended the session with a heavy heart. He had tried to warn them after the Jupiter battle. He had suggested negotiating with humanity. The other Council members had ignored him. Now the situation was spiraling out of control. Commander Lisa Harper received Velrith's message in the middle of the night. She was reviewing battle reports when the encrypted signal arrived. Her hands went cold as she read the contents. 1 word and a set of coordinates: run. Lisa immediately contacted Admiral Bennett. The old warrior was still awake in his office. He listened as Lisa explained the message. Bennett pulled up the coordinates on his screen. His face went pale. The location was just beyond Earth's moon. The timestamp was 48 hours away. The Council was sending something to kill their world. Bennett activated emergency protocols. Within minutes, every military commander on Earth was on a conference call. Bennett explained the situation without emotion. They had 2 days before something arrived that could destroy their planet. They did not know exactly what it was, but if a Council ambassador was warning them to run, it had to be devastating. The room fell silent. Then Admiral Jake Morrison spoke up from his position near Mars. He asked if running was even possible. Could they evacuate Earth in 48 hours? Everyone knew the answer. Impossible. Earth had 10 billion people. They could maybe save a few million in that time. The rest would die. Bennett made his decision. They would not run. They would not evacuate. They would fight. If something was coming to destroy Earth, they would destroy it first. But Bennett also knew their defensive fleet might not be enough. He needed another option. A backup plan. Jake Morrison provided it. He suggested a strike team go directly to the Council homeworld. Capture the leadership and force a surrender before the weapon reached Earth. It was insane. It was desperate. It was their only chance. Bennett approved the mission immediately. Jake assembled his team within 6 hours. He took the Horizon and 20 of the best soldiers in the fleet. Sergeant Kyle Peterson led the ground team. Kyle was a legend among the Marines. He had fought in every major battle since the Jupiter engagement. His squad followed him without question. Dr. Helen Price volunteered to join them. She had studied Council architecture from the captured data. She knew the layout of the high chamber on Dravis Prime. Her knowledge would be crucial. Jake accepted her into the team. The Horizon jumped to hyperspace on a course that would take them deep into Council territory. They had one advantage. The communication hub that Sophie Barnes had captured was still feeding them enemy fleet positions. Jake plotted a route through the gaps in Council defenses. It would take them 36 hours to reach Dravis Prime. They would arrive with only 12 hours to spare before the weapon reached Earth. 12 hours to infiltrate the most heavily defended planet in Council space. 12 hours to capture the government. 12 hours to save their world. Captain Amy Foster prepared Earth's defensive fleet. She had been promoted after the Talos operation. Now she commanded the Home Defense Forces. Amy studied the coordinates Velrith had provided. Whatever was coming would emerge from hyperspace near the moon. She positioned her ships accordingly. 50 vessels arranged in a defensive sphere. It was not much against a planet killer, but it was everything Earth had left. Amy walked through the Valiant's corridors and saw the determination on her crew's faces. They knew what was coming. They were ready to die if necessary. The weapon arrived exactly when Velrith said it would. Amy watched it materialize on her sensors. The thing was massive beyond comprehension. Larger than a battleship, larger than a station. It was a construct of dark metal covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Architect technology twisted into a tool of genocide. The weapon's shields registered off the scale. Its power output was enough to light a small star. Amy knew immediately that her fleet could not stop this thing through conventional means. They needed a miracle. Lieutenant Dan Crawford analyzed the weapon from his station. He ran every scan the Horizon systems could provide. The data came back grim. The weapon's hull was nearly invulnerable. Its shields would absorb anything they threw at it. But Dan kept looking. There had to be a weakness. Everything had a weakness. Then he found it. The weapon drew enormous amounts of energy. That energy had to come from somewhere. A power core. The core was buried deep inside the construct, but it had to vent excess heat. Heat meant exhaust ports. Exhaust ports were vulnerabilities. Amy saw Dan's analysis and understood what had to be done. The only way to destroy the weapon was to get inside it, to penetrate the hull and detonate something directly against the power core. It would require a ship to fly into the exhaust system, navigate through kilometers of superheated channels, reach the core and overload it. The ship that made that run would not come back. Amy made her decision without hesitation. She would take the Valiant. Her crew deserved better than this. They deserved to go home. But someone had to make the run, and Amy would not ask anyone to do what she would not do herself. Jake Morrison brought the Horizon out of hyperspace at the edge of the Dravis system. Dravis Prime hung in space like a gray pearl. The planet was covered in cities and defensive installations. Hundreds of ships orbited the world. This was the seat of Council power. Jake counted at least 50 patrol vessels within sensor range. Getting to the surface would require stealth. Helen Price had a solution. She had found something in the captured archives. Plans for a Council stealth transport. The technology used architect cloaking systems. Jake ordered his engineers to retrofit the Horizon with the specifications. It took 4 hours. 4 precious hours while Earth faced annihilation. The modified Horizon approached Dravis Prime invisible to sensors. Jake brought the ship down through the atmosphere. They bypassed orbital defenses and ground-based scanners. The Horizon landed in an industrial district 5 kilometers from the government complex. Kyle Peterson's Marines disembarked in combat gear. They moved through the city streets like ghosts. The council citizens they passed never suspected. Humans looked alien enough to blend in with the diverse population. Helen guided them through back alleys and maintenance tunnels. She had memorized the route from studying city maps. The government complex was protected by elite guards, Phyrexian warriors with advanced armor and weapons. Kyle's squad took them down silently. One by one, the guards fell. The humans moved with efficiency born from desperation. They had no time for mistakes. Helen led them to a service entrance. The door was locked with biometric security. Helen bypassed it using codes from the archives. They were inside. The high chamber was 3 levels up. Kyle split his team. Half would secure the exits. Half would assault the chamber. Amy Foster piloted the Valiant toward the weapon. Her crew had argued against her decision. They wanted to come with her. Amy ordered them to evacuate. She would pilot the ship alone. Her crew refused. They had fought together for 2 years. They would die together if necessary. Amy felt tears on her face as she gave up arguing. These were the best people she had ever known. The Valiant accelerated toward the exhaust port. The opening was barely large enough. Amy threaded the ship through with perfect precision. The heat inside was incredible. Alarms screamed warnings. The hull began to buckle. Kyle Peterson breached the high chamber door with explosive charges. The Marines poured through the smoke. The council members were in session. They looked up in shock as humans burst into their sanctum. High Counselor Draven reached for an alarm. Kyle shot the console out of his hand. The counselor froze. Kyle's voice was hard as iron. He told them to surrender or die. Most of the council members raised their hands. But Draven grabbed a guard's weapon. He fired wildly. Kyle's squad returned fire. Draven fell. The other council members did not move. Jake Morrison entered the chamber. He looked at the assembled aliens. These beings had ordered the death of his world. He wanted to kill them all. But that was not the mission. The Valiant reached the power core. Amy could see it through the view screen, a sphere of pure energy contained by architect technology. Beautiful and terrible. She armed every weapon on the ship. Torpedoes and missiles and plasma charges, everything. She set them to detonate simultaneously. The explosion would overload the core. Chain reaction would tear the weapon apart. Amy opened a channel to Earth. She said goodbye to her parents. She said goodbye to her friends. She said she was proud to serve. Then she fired everything. The Valiant's weapons struck the core in perfect synchronization. The energy sphere cracked. Reality screamed. Amy Foster closed her eyes as white light consumed her ship. The weapon exploded with the force of a small sun. The blast could be seen from Earth. The planet killer was destroyed. Jake Morrison held a communicator to the Council's collective throat. He told them the terms: immediate ceasefire, complete surrender, dissolution of their government, formation of a new Galactic Congress with equal representation for all species. The Council members looked at each other. Ambassador Velrith spoke first. He accepted. The others followed. They had no choice. Their weapon was destroyed. Their military was scattered. Their lies were exposed. The Council's 10,000-year reign ended in a chamber on Dravis Prime, with human soldiers standing over them. Commander Lisa Harper received confirmation from Jake. The Council had surrendered. Lisa immediately broadcasted the news across all frequencies.